But I do see both sides of it now a lot more than I did. But back to your question, yes, we have the front-facing government, the elected officials. Then we have the body politic, the people that are there, the career people that have been there forever. And then we have the clandestine groups. And then below that, we have the black operations that really over time, they're accountable to nobody. And so the reason the military wasn't officially studying this, even though they were, but only in very compartmentalized avenues, is because there was a whole policy to put the ridicule factor into the front-facing rank and file of the military so that they didn't look at it. But the idea that they were never looking at it and it wasn't being studied by anybody ever is ludicrous. And that's what Accidental Truth is about. It's about, they rolled out this new narrative that said Project Blue Book ended. Nothing happened until the program started in 2004.
And for people who aren't familiar, who didn't see the James Fox podcast, can you just explain very quickly what Project Blue Book was?
Sure. So Project Blue Book was, back in the 50s, there was a huge flap about UFOs. It was bigger than it is now in popular culture. Mm-hmm. And so the government did a couple of things to try to appease the public. And one of them was, we're going to do Project Blue Book. We're going to go and officially investigate this. How that turned out was that it really was not a real honest investigation into UFOs.
It's a cover-up.
It was a cover-up. Yeah, it was basically kind of a dog and pony show. And in Accidental Truth, we actually uncovered that there was a whole other parallel group that was studying these phenomena secretly while Project Blue Book was paraded in front of the public. So now, enter 2017, 18, when we get these stories that come out, the resurgence of UFOs in common and military culture, that Project Blue Book ended with this official closing, and that the government had no involvement in UFO studies until they picked up what was eventually the ATIP program. And the film is really all about uncovering that is completely untrue and showing a lot of what was going on, what they discovered, what they were studying, and what came out of these missing years. Because what we call the new narrative that says there was this big gap where government wasn't studying this at all, unfortunately, they're whitewashing that past because they want to be able to, the information is going to come to the surface, but how they got it and how they kept it a secret and how they manipulated it and who's been in control, that's this empty period between the 50s and the 90s and the 2000s where they can't talk about it. They've got culpability they have to relieve themselves of. They've got accountability that they're not going to take because terrible things were done to keep very important information away from the public. So if you are, quote unquote, the government, how are you going to get this information out? Because sooner or later, Elon Musk is going to land on Mars and he's going to know that there's something there. And private commercial space is going to come out and they're going to find something. A spaceship sooner or later is going to land. Some evidence that is irrefutable is going to come forward sooner than later in our day of technology.
You don't think those people are in on it? They got to be read in.
So I think they're read into a point. I think like I actually have this on good authority. I called Elon out about his thing about not saying aliens. I went on YouTube and did a video. Thousands of people watched it.
Not saying aliens?
Yeah. When Elon was at he was in Boca, Texas, where his Starlink or the Starship base is, and it was one of the times when he was revealing the prototype for the big Starship. Well, he came out during that speech and he says, aliens. I don't know. I've never seen any evidence of aliens. He says, and I should know. Well, the next day I made a YouTube video and I said, Elon, I don't know why you're saying this stuff. Why don't you talk to Robert Bigelow? I got a proposition for you. And I made it a big joke because at the time my studio was right across the street from SpaceX in Hawthorne. And I actually had a spaceship set in my studio where Kendrick Lamar came and shot his video with George Clinton. And so I'm like, Elon, come on, man, we're buddies. You got a spaceship in Hawthorne, California? I have a spaceship in Hawthorne, California. I mean, it makes us kindred spirits. And I made a joke out of it. But I said, look, private briefing. I will send some of the best experts in the world from MUFON and from the UFO community, and we just need a half hour of your time.
Yeah, that's not... Elon is... He's got contracts up and down with the government. that to me, like, he knows. He knows
Well,
what
see,
it is.
that's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
Is we made that offer to him, and I know for a fact that because we put the media link to MUFON, they got overwhelmed with people saying, "Why don't you do it?" Elon's thing, I believe, I can't say for sure, but I've also talked to people that run video production inside his
He
organization.
might be an alien.
Yeah, maybe. And the thing is he's got his interest in space. And he's been told by the people that are making sure that he gets to continue having an interest in space. Yes. Stay away from the alien thing. Just don't go there.
Why, but here's a question. Why does he stay away, but Robert Bigelow goes right in?
Well, look what happened to Robert Bigelow when he did.
What happened to Robert Bigelow when he did?
Okay, they will deny that there's any connection because I personally asked people that would know if I was right. But when Robert Bigelow went on 60 Minutes and said there's definitely aliens, within a few months, Bigelow Aerospace imploded, supposedly because of COVID. His technology for these space habitats got sequestered off and cannibalized by a bunch of other companies, just took it. And NASA stiffed him for millions of dollars in owed contracts. He had to sue them to get his money.
And we had mentioned Bigelow earlier, but for full context for people who aren't totally aware, what was his claim to fame and who is he and how long has he been around?
So Robert Bigelow is a billionaire from Nevada. He made his money building like residential hotels for people. That's where he made his money, like budget suites, places where working people could have a place to stay for an extended period. He made a lot of money, and he always had an interest in the paranormal. At one point, he bought Skinwalker Ranch and formed the National Institute for Discovery Sciences, where basically he brought in this was formed around him meeting and getting to know a bunch of these guys that have been involved in some of these programs that we uncover in Accidental Truth, Hal Puthoff and guys like Eric Davis and some of the other people that were involved in this, Colonel John Alexander, who was running these secret government programs studying UFOs. In Accidental Truth, he reveals that he was actually with Robert Bigelow the day he bought Skinwalker Ranch, and he went and spent the first night alone up on the mesa. So all of these military spooky guys got with Robert Bigelow, and they formed this institute. And then right after he bought Skinwalker Ranch, here comes the Defense Intelligence Agency with a contract, and that was the beginning of ATIP. So, which was OSOP at the time, and I don't remember exactly what that stands for.
Yeah, what was the exact? So basically, what Bigelow purchased and what he was building created what became a government agency called ATIP.
Well, it wasn't really. It was kind of like ATIP itself. Well, I'll go into that after I tell the story because people don't really understand the taxonomy of how this all works. But Robert Bigelow formed the National Institute of Discovery Science with all of these guys that had government ties and backgrounds, and they were studying Skinwalker Ranch and other things. And that's when the DIA found out about what was going on, and they went there and they were intrigued, and so they decided to throw some money at it. But all these guys are connected and talking all along. It's not like suddenly something this.
Yeah, it didn't fall from the sky.
Right. Yeah. So when the DIA got involved, the program was called OSOP, and the contract for that was given to Robert Bigelow. And some of the stuff that he was supposed to study was a weird phenomenon at Skinwalker Ranch, but there are also things in the contract about studying materials, studying technology, studying human biological interfaces, and all kinds of different technologies that we don't have, all under one umbrella. And so that was the beginning of this program that came out with Lou Elizondo.
And when was that approximately?
Back in the 2000s, early 2000s.
Because that's where I get a little lost, because I'm like, it seems like it was born organically out of this quote-unquote private citizen just investing in this stuff. Well, and with the connotation that then the government didn't already have something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's a little sketch to me.
Well, see, this is all a part of coming up with a logical way to bubble this information to the public without having to admit where it came from. Okay, so what we're seeing here is that all of these guys that were in these government programs, mid-level, partially read in, they know enough to know that there's been crash debris. They know enough to know that there's different technologies that have been reverse engineered, but they don't know everything. And they're not even read in. But they've been read in enough to the point where they know enough to know what's going on with materials, with debris. They know about some of the programs. And then when they found Robert Bigelow, that was, he was interested in this stuff and he had money. And so that gave them another way to fund this stuff. Because a lot of the work that like Hal Puthoff and even John Alexander did back in the day was what they call ad hoc programs, which means that they weren't really official government programs, but they were being run by a bunch of people with all of the resources and access because they were in the government. And it's very common. And they call them ad hoc programs. And the reason they're ad hoc is because it enables them to not be accountable to Freedom of Information Act requests. In other words, if you have an official government program that's going to study something, well, then that becomes part of an official record that may have to be revealed. But if you have an ad hoc program where it's like, hey, I got this guy from the CIA, we all have clearances, and we're all talking, and it's like, hey, what's this piece of technology?
But nobody knows nothing.
We think it's anti-gravity. We're going to have to look into that. And so they all get together and they decide that's what they're going to do. But it's not under an official auspice of a government program that's officially budgeted, blah, 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 blah. It's still being run with all the resources and abilities of people with high clearances, but it's an ad hoc program. Therefore, it's not accountable ever. And so Puthoff and Alexander and all of these different people back in the day were running a lot of these programs, some of them under official auspices, but also some of them as ad hoc programs. And when they got with Robert Bigelow, obviously running ad hoc programs means you don't have government money. And so Robert Bigelow was a breath of fresh air to these guys because he did have money. Lots of it.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.